Another loss for the Arizona Coyotes. They take a 5-2 loss to the visiting Minnesota Wild. We'll talk about that game and as well. Take a look forward to what's coming up this weekend. Arizona Coyotes, Chicago Blackhawks, and Nashville Predators all coming up for this weekend. We'll talk all about that on today's episode of Locked On Coyotes.
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Robyn Leonio. Carl Pavlik right beside me on this Thursday. It is November 11th. It is Veterans Day, so we wanted to go ahead and start off by, shouting out to all those who served in the in the U.S. Armed Forces.
Happy Veterans Day. Both my parents are actually Marine veterans, so
Nice.
it's a somewhat personal holiday. They never really celebrated it or did anything for it, so it was always kind of an interesting place. But happy Veterans Day.
Yep, exactly. But here on Locked On Coyotes, we're here to talk about the Arizona Coyotes gameplay and just not so good stuff. They took a 5-2 loss to the Minnesota Wild at home. Carl, this was about one goal off from what my prediction was. I think I said 5-3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I can't even remember what I said. I think it may have been like,
Maybe
I
like
think
4-3.
was it 4-3?
I think you had a one goal game.
I did have a 1-goal game, so I was way off. I swear I remember them being below the 5.5 expected goals, which wow turned out to be way wrong. I don't know. I think we had all planned for maybe a somewhat different game, but everyone kind of expected the Coyotes to lose this one, and they did kind of spectacularly with a second period collapse.
Yeah, anytime there is a team where the opposing team has more than call it or has at least one former Coyote, there just seems to be, even if that player doesn't do enough.
Yeah, I was gonna say like we saw Alex Golgoski in the game. There was a couple times where like he was like making his play behind the net, and I'm like, oh, that's familiar. He was limited to just one assist, which is pretty good for limiting former Coyotes' chances. But oh wow, the Wild scoring just did not stop at all.
Exactly. And that's the problem. It was again 5-2 the final score, and trying to look at anything on here. Looking at who is Kevin Fiala, freaking that dude. Like he was like that dude had a game.
Yeah.
And I guess if there's a game to have, you're gonna do it against the Coyotes. But whew.
Yeah, Kevin Fiala had a game. A lot of Minnesota players had a really good game. I think this was like another issue where the Coyotes were an undisciplined team. They did not do great on the penalty kill, and that really cost them. They allowed 2 power play goals. Joel Eriksson Ek and Kirill Kaprizov both scored on the power play, but the second Minnesota goal was actually on a delayed call. I don't even think the goaltender had gotten a chance to get to the bench, so I don't know how much that impacted it. But it was definitely an issue where like some poor play definitely led to the Coyotes being in a bad situation. And again, we saw the Coyotes; they weren't able to convert on any of their power plays. So special teams again proved to be like a pretty like pivotal issue for the Coyotes, as we've seen time and again this season.
By the way, I'm trying to remember because now that you mentioned it, how are those goals counted on those delayed? Is it counted as an extra attacker goal even if the goalie doesn't get to the bench?
No, it's not really noted in any of the traditional kind of stats. Delayed calls I've never seen on the box sheet. It's possible that some of the advanced stats look for them, but I don't see too many delayed calls. It
Because it is different than 5-on-5. Because anytime there's a difference of 5-on-5, that you see, or even strength for that matter, you're gonna see, something noted: PPG, PK, EN. Like,
yeah. Like you'll see like an empty net goal if you get an empty net, or even like a same goal empty net goal. I think I've seen that before, but I've never seen any kind of notation denoting a an extra attacker goal. Maybe we should look into that and see, because I imagine, well, it's kind of a rare situation. You don't see too many of them, so it may not be worth tracking. But like for stats heads, everything is worth tracking. So it'd be kind of
especially
curious
when
to
you
see.
work in the media like us, where it's just like, oh, I want to be able to pay attention to as much as possible because you
Yeah.
can track you can track so much.
Or if you're in the media like us and you're like, I need to fill content, so here's a somewhat interesting stat. X team has the most uh, delayed call goals. Like that could definitely be like just a line you throw out during a recap or play by play.
I,
So
I totally would do stuff like that whenever I did play by play for football or basketball, or did a radio show talking about the NHL. I was just like, oh, by the way, I just read that X player was the first player to have all these things. Like, I'm just like, it was fun doing
yeah,
those that weird stats.
it's fun trivia. And since we're kind of talking about broadcasting, I thought the TNT crew did a pretty good job for calling the game. I didn't watch too much of like the intermission stuff because I mean the Coyotes were losing pretty badly. I didn't need to know more about why they were losing badly. So I will sometimes just mute that and like read or play video games for 15 minutes, do the dishes. But I thought TNT has had a really solid broadcast. I've been impressed with like ESPN Plus, TNT. Like it's been a pretty good year for NHL broadcasting on the
And again,
national front.
both have been an upgrade from NBC.
Yeah, you could tell that we finally have like broadcast networks that are putting in more effort. They're not necessarily taking it for granted. They're trying new things. Like we're seeing a lot of like player tracking. Like how long is that have they been on the shift? A nice thing where we would see like the miles per hour for the puck. Like anytime Jacob Chikrin shot, it was like 90 mile per hour
Yeah.
from the point. I just want him to score. So yeah, good job TNT. I was a bit worried because your app on Roku took so long to navigate to find the game, but nice production.
One thing that I noticed because I saw a bit of the intermission reports that Gretzky wasn't there, but Paul Bissonnette was.
Yeah,
So you had the Rick Tocchet, Paul Bissonnette. So you had Coyotes connection. You're always gonna have a Coyotes connection on the
on the broadcast. Yeah.
on the intermission report for TNT.
Yeah, there was a great moment. I don't know if you got a chance to see it. But before the game started, they were talking to Jacob Chikrin, who was mic'd during warmups, and it started with, "Now Jacob, I know someone told you that you're never gonna have to talk to Talkit again, but he's here right now." I was like, "Oh, that is just a beautiful moment of levity."
Oh my god, I love it.
That was so good. It was great. Especially like NHL fans hate change uh, in any form. So I thought it was a really well done kind of presentation for what was just a horrible game to watch. I really did not like watching last night's game.
Yeah. Speaking of also just like interesting things from last night's game, has to be that on the national TV game where the Coyotes have to wear their now called alternate reds. Like,
Yeah.
I got thrown off for a second. Like, wait a minute, why are they wearing? Oh, it's one of these games.
I don't even know if it was like specifically like how that like formed. Like if it was like, hey, you're gonna be a national game, we want you wearing this for contractual reasons. Because it sounds like that's what the situation is. Like there's a contractual obligation between the Coyotes, the NHL, and Reebok, Fanatics, whoever, that they're gonna still like keep that an active jersey. But yeah, it's unfortunate, especially with like how much of their branding is the Kachina, that they weren't able to wear the Kachina on like the national broadcast. Um, but I don't mind. I still like that Howling Coyote logo, and I still think that the redesign that they had was really good. I like the arms more so than I think any NHL jersey. I like that kind of color breakdown. So I wasn't too upset to see it. Like you said, I was a bit thrown at first, where I'm like, "Oh, that's different."
Yeah, because we're just so used to seeing Kachina at this point. We've watched almost every single game where it was all Kachina, and
Yeah,
and it just comes up out of nowhere. It's like, oh, well, here we go.
especially with the road Kachinas, where unlike last year, where they also had like a split, but more heavily weighted towards the Kachina at home. But like saw the the Howling Coyote whites on the road, like now you don't even have that. This is like the only instance where we're seeing what is now I don't know what to call that logo. I don't necessarily like the Howling Coyote as a name, but you can't call it classic because that doesn't sound right at all. But yeah, that other jersey.
The Howling Coyote is a modern,
Yeah, postmodern maybe.
maybe,
I don't
yeah,
know. I'll come up with something very pretentious to call it, and no one will understand except for me, um, because that's usually what I do in these situations.
that sounds about right. Anyway,
Yeah.
so we still get more to get to on today's episode of Lockdown Coyotes. We're going to talk about maybe things that stood out, maybe in a good way, a couple other things of we can take away from this game against Minnesota Wild. All that coming up on today's episode of Lockdown Coyotes. But first, a quick word from our sponsors.
So we're back and better than ever. A new web interface to start the basketball season, and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, so now back here on Lockdown Coyotes. Once again, Robin Leonio, Carl Pavlik, as we talk about the Arizona Coyotes' 5-2 loss to the Minnesota Wild. Take things that are some good things. Carl, I think one thing we can definitely mention is another multi-point game for the defenseman Shane Gostisbehere.
Yep. Shane Gottsberg has been pretty much the Coyotes' best offensive defenseman this season. He had a phenomenal game with a goal and an assist. I thought he looked great. He's been a great acquisition for the Coyotes this year, especially for how little it costs. It's mostly just his contract, and he's consistently been I'm not sure if I would say the Coyotes' best defenseman, but one of the best defensemen.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things too is I did a lineup challenge with Locked On Wild. Seth asked me if I could do just fill in a just like pick a player from each forward line and then pick one defenseman. Like, okay, I'll go pick these four forwards who have all pretty much contributed on each of their lines. And I'm like, oh, defenseman, easy. I'm going to pick Shane Gostisbehere. He's gonna outshine again. I think he's gonna have another good game.
Yeah.
And of course, there he goes again.
Yeah, and I do think it helps that he's getting some pretty good minutes. He and kind of just where he falls. He's in kind of the sweet spot that we saw Jacob Chikrin in last season, where there's someone like ahead of him on the depth that's going to get the super duper hard assignments. I think Chikrin is still facing the toughest competition. I would need to check the official rankings for that. But yeah, it allows him to kind of pick up points against some of the easier lines. And by no means is he having like an easy job because the team in general is not scoring, but I think he's been doing great.
Yeah.
And probably is the Coyotes MVP at this point. That's a tough call really to make because
It's too early to really decide that, but yeah,
it's
he has made a phenomenal contribution to this team so far.
yeah, it's too early and like it's really hard to say that any of the players have been extremely valuable. If that's fair. And he is also inconsistent, but I think he is like there's a reason he's leading the team in points.
Exactly. One thing I think we also should mention, because it is a question that should be made, um, the situation regarding Karel Vejmelka. We talked about him, and he had so many good games, and
Yeah.
we were saying, and we even asked ourselves, how long can he keep this up? Is this just another example of just a bad start, or is it kind of just like, or is that like is that a streak that he had just kind of fizzing out?
It's really tough to say, and honestly, we could probably do a whole podcast episode on Vimelka's performance, like every game that he plays, because it is like it tends to be either really good or really bad. Uh, I don't think he was necessarily horrible in last night's game. I think there was definitely some shots that you know, if things had been different, he probably could have made them. I think he's maybe like cheating a little bit, goaltender wise. Listening to the analysis of his play is kind of really interesting because there's a lot of player or a lot of media people who are looking at it and they're like, all right, so this is something that you could maybe do in the Czech league that you're not going to get away with in the NHL. Czech league, you're probably going to be going down a little bit more. That leaves space like top shelf kind of areas. And I am noticing that he's maybe getting caught a little bit there. But I think the team also is just like they had a second period collapse where they gave up 3 goals. And that's
Yeah,
not only going to be on the goaltender, especially when one of them was like a almost lacrosse kind of like knocking the puck out of midair with the blade of the stick. Like there's nothing that you could really do for a goal like that as a goaltender. So I don't think Vimelka necessarily played a horrible game. I think he played like a below average game against a very tough team that's going to make you pay for every mistake.
absolutely. But that also leaves a question too, obviously because Carter Hutton is still on the injured reserve.
Yep.
Um, what is going to happen when he is set to come back from the IR, and now you're looking at three goaltenders: Vejmelka, Wedgwood, and Hutton.
Yeah. And I would really need to check to see kind of what their eligibility is. I almost feel like Wedgwood like earned his spot here.
Mm-hmm.
I think Vimelka's played better than Hutton. I would maybe waive Hutton, or I could kind of see the Coyotes just keeping 3 goaltenders around. Like it worked well during last year, when pretty much every team had 3. The Coyotes do not have a strong goaltender. Why not cycle through 3 and kind of see what they can do? You don't necessarily need to keep like extra forward and an extra defenseman, especially with the team being so close to Tucson that can call up as needed. I don't know. It's a really tough call, and I'm not sure that anyone has really stood out in a way that like demands that they have a spot.
Yeah, especially because usually you have more than one extra forward, anyways. Because it's like I think it's just 25 roster players, right? There's
Yeah,
25 on the active roster.
yeah.
So, and I think what is it? That's 5 extra players technically, right? Because it's usually 20, 12, 6, 1.
You're making me do math too early in the morning.
I know.
So,
Oh no, it's 19.
uh, well, let's say this: the scratches for the
Yeah,
Coyotes last game, Liam O'Brien and Kyle Capobianco. Uh, but Minnesota had three scratches: Jordy Ben, uh, Kyle Rao, and Victor Rask. So they could maybe make something work. I'm not sure kind of what that would be, especially because we have Coyotes players who are hopefully coming back from injury very soon, like your Alex Galchenyuk. I think the team could really use his offense. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe they shop Hutton. That just didn't sound right. As soon as I said it, I'm like, what's his trade value?
it's not very high. You're not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah, no.
Best case scenario, you waive him and someone wants to pick him up, and you just get like, what's the um thing? Oh yeah, they it's just like that person just picks up like a certain percentage of their salary cap, whatever it was. Forgot how that works.
I mean, I think the best case scenario is kind of they put him on waivers, send him back to or send someone down to play with the Roadrunners as a backup, and that all kind of shifts. Or I do think that if they put someone other than Vamelka on waivers and they get claimed, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I don't see any of these players really being the Coyotes' gold center of the future. I think that's still Prosvetov.
It
Um,
is.
so kind of what happens with any of these players? Um, it's unfortunate to think about people this way, but they're kind of expendable, and that's kind of the case for everyone on this team during the rebuild.
Yeah. I think that's again. I think you made a really good point about not worrying about really goaltenders at this point because again, like you said, Prosvetov is the future, and you don't. If you waive a player, you can send them to Tucson, but then how does that deal with the? Because then that breaks three goaltenders in Tucson. But you would definitely want to make sure that Prosvetov is getting the bulk of the starts
Yeah,
because you want to make sure he is always ready.
I mean that's why we acquired Wedgwood, or that's why the team acquired Wedgwood. I wasn't involved in that decision. Um, it was to make sure that Prosvetov can get starts in the AHL. And I think that is still the plan. And that's kind of the main goal. They want to make sure that they have someone who's going to help them win. And I think probably at this point, Vimelka and Wedgwood are the best at that. But Carter Hunt also has the most experience. He's the only one who's really like done this for a prolonged period of time. Vimelka, I think a key thing that we're going to be talking about for the entire season is like this is uncharted territory for the netminder. He's still relatively young as far as goaltenders are considered. He has no NHL experience, no North American play experience. Like it's a completely different game that it'll be kind of interesting to see what he can do.
Exactly. Hey guys, we still got more to get to on this show. We're gonna start taking a look ahead. What's coming up for the Arizona Coyotes for the rest of this week? All that coming up on this episode of Locked On Coyotes. So be sure to stick around. So let's get to it. Coyotes have two games this weekend. They have the Chicago Blackhawks tomorrow, and then the Nashville Predators on
Saturday.
Saturday. So it's another back to back, and this is now officially back on the road.
Back on the road, back to back. A lot of backs going on. Thankfully for the Coyotes, a much easier road trip than I think that they had last time. And I think the Coyotes have a decent chance for winning at least one of these two games. I think both are very winnable, but I'd be happy if they walk away with 2 points.
Yeah, I think they're. I think these are both very winnable games as well, and I think that this this part of the schedule probably came at a really nice time. They already had at least one win under their belt. So like the confidence might have been shot a little bit after that kind of loss to Minnesota, but like they know they're capable of winning because they just did last week.
Yeah.
And Chicago is a worse team than Seattle is, and
Yes.
Nashville is a mediocre team at best.
Sure.
So
I think as long as they are like mentally able to just block out that Minnesota loss, because Minnesota's a better team. They've matched up against the Coyotes much better for the past couple seasons. Like that kind of loss is just understandable. I think kind of the issue that we've seen with the Coyotes this year is that they're not able to necessarily like mentally block that out and just start the next game. They can be shaken up. And I think part of that's just because they're a very not good team and a very like not or very like new team. Like there's not a lot of chemistry there. They can't rely on each other the same way they could. I thought they may have built up some of that against some of the tough teams on the previous road trip, but then it all kind of fell apart against the Wild. Uh, as the saying goes, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
exactly, but this um, I guess you can call it somewhat Midwest road trip, kind of because you got Chicago, Nashville, and then St. Louis.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
never sure where Nashville is considered
it's not
and everything.
Midwest, but it's not East Coast either. It's like it's the South. It's
Yeah,
technically the South, but like it's that area of the central U.S. So
yeah, that Appalachian area, if I recall.
sure,
It was the same when I was like living up in Buffalo. I had like no idea what part of the country I was considered. It's like the Northeast. I'm like, that doesn't sound right,
Great
really.
Lakes, right?
Great Lakes, yeah, but I mean, we don't like to define ourselves by the lakes that are mostly in a different state. Like Great Lakes seems more Michigan's thing, but eh. The geography of the United States is weird.
What about Rust Belt? Isn't that area?
Rust Belt's more Pennsylvania. Like there wasn't a
Pennsylvania,
lot of
Ohio.
yeah, Pennsylvania, Ohio. There's not a lot of manufacturing in Western New York. Like there's some, but it wasn't like the major industry that you would get in what I would consider the Rust Belt states.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, I guess it's like, because yeah, like certain states, like even parts of states, are all in different regions.
Yeah,
SoCal's part of the Southwest, but
yeah. Like Western New York or New York in general is like split up into so many distinct regions that I'm sure only people who live in New York care about. Like whenever I try and just talk about the distinctions to people who aren't in New York, they're just like, I don't care. It's like, see, this is the problem. But yeah, no, it's a road trip, Midwest adjacent, let's call it, and honestly, it should be hopefully an easier road trip. And we've seen the Coyotes kind of have bounce backs from like facing the top competition to facing lesser competition and playing well against that lesser competition.
yeah, that's the I think that's one of the most important parts because do you want to play against teams that are winnable teams? That way, that team gets that the Coyotes can get a little bit more confidence. Obviously, playing the Blues is when they get to them is going to be another punch in the mouth probably,
Yeah,
but
probably. Although maybe the Coyotes matched up well against them last year. Maybe it'll be something where the Blues have that in their head. The same way I think the Coyotes maybe had Minnesota's last year record in their head.
it could be. I would be really excited to see how it goes. But the Coyotes versus Blackhawks one, obviously the first one that come up the first time that the two. I mean, it's going to be an experience between two complete basement teams, like
Yeah.
true freaking basement teams. Both these teams are really bad. Um, See, what the goaltending looks like for either team. I know probably they're going to try. Blackhawks probably going to try to start Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah.
And then not only that is we're going to see this one another game on ESPN Plus and Hulu. So
Very nice. Very nice. I know. I think people have been enjoying that. It should be an interesting matchup. I kind of wonder if it'll be like the game against the Buffalo Sabres, who everyone thought would be a basement team, but ended up being just a very low scoring shootout affair. Maybe we'll get that against the Blackhawks, especially with Marc-Andre Fleury in net. I can imagine that being a tough game. I could also imagine it being a goal scoring like extravaganza. So, gonna have to see how that one goes.
We will have to see how that one goes. But anyways, that's going to be just at a time here, though. We are going to go into our full preview of this weekend's game on tomorrow's episode. Be sure to stay tuned in. Then, if you like what you heard today, don't forget to leave a review, a like, comment, subscribe if you get to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcast, including on YouTube. We're also available on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnCoyotes, on Twitter at LO_Coyotes. I am personally at Robyn _Leano. That is ROBYN_LEANO. Carl Pavlik is at Carl Pavlik FFH. Interact with us, ask us any question you might have. We might answer right back or on a future episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. That's going to do it for today. Hope you guys are staying safe out there. Hope you guys are staying healthy. And don't forget to howl on.